like to thank our sponsors, our presenting partners, Jabra, our gold partner, D-Link, building networks for people, our technology partner, Acer, our Thrive Skills partner, Harappa, our government supporting partners, Government of Telangana, AICTE, our knowledge partner, NBT.India, our associate partners, MapMyIndia, Quest, Veer Softech, EduSkills, Superbot, and Eval, our institute partners, Jaipuria Institute of Management and International Institute of Management and Technology, our university partners, Shobit Institute of Engineering and Technology, deemed to be university, Shulini University, Chitkara University, OP Jindal University, Raipur, and Noida International University, our academic partners, Millennium Education Management and Little Millennium, our school partners, Sanford World School and City Montessori School, Lucknow, our preschool partners, Sanford Group of Schools. Bangalore, Avnish Singh, Director, Millennium Schools, and Vinesh Menon, CEO, Education, Consulting and Skilling Services, Mumbai.
Good afternoon, everyone. It's nice to be here. I think, first of all, thank you, Adror, for taking the lead and putting up a physical seminar after so long. It's been 20 odd months, and it's really fascinating to see everybody in person. On a lighter note, I can imagine me not saying things like, please go on mute, or please unmute yourself, or I don't have to say I can't see you, or I don't have to say that there is a network connection and a drop happening in my Wi-Fi connection, etc. So I think that's on the lighter side. Having said that, while we are taking pot shots at technology, fact is that we are still going to talk about it, and we're going to talk about it in a very serious manner, because I think the big change that has happened between previous seminars and this one is that we've had a 20-month gap where technology somewhere walked the talk of all that we were talking about for so long. And we actually experienced what technology would do for us, our teachers, our students, our parents, and I think we are full of experiences now, which probably will come out, from all these folks who are on the panel. So I think the topic is interesting. I think we're talking about technology as a facilitator for independent learning and computational thinking, and we understand that we started a little late. We'll attempt to continue to keep our end line at about 2 o'clock or 2:05. What you're going to hear today is probably just experiences, and probably with that we'll have our pros, we'll have our cons, we can have a discussion which can go deeper into some of them. I'm going to straight away start off asking you, Dr. Niyati, because you've got schools in Chandigarh. I've been noticing, and we also realize, sorry, before I come to you, that two very significant things that happened in 2020 was one, of course, the pandemic, which everybody's aware of, but also somewhere in July, August, the NEP got published. And NEP 2020 in some form had resonance with the pandemic in many areas. Use of technology, early child education, the fact that till the age of 7, the brain of a child has to be really harnessed, etc. So all this in some form can come out in our conversation. So I want to start with you. I've been noticing, your school has started getting some initiatives around NEP 2020, InfoBytes, for example, vernacular language. Yeah. Just give us a sense of how the experience has been, especially on the areas that you're talking about. What has been your experience with children, teachers in the last 20 months?
So good afternoon, everybody. I'm not going to talk about things that all of us were doing, during the COVID times. We were all online, doing the best that was possible, because they're all experts sitting out here. So what I'll be talking about is things that I feel really made an impact in our school system during these 18 to 20 months. And the first thing that I'd like to mention here, as he mentioned, and thank you so much that you've researched so well about InfoByte. So first of all, during pandemic, in a majority of our schools, we have 25% students studying from the economically weaker section in our school, right? And I don't know whether they had gadgets or not, or their parents, they're not English speaking. And I remember, though our school is on a mobile app, but parents used to, especially EWS parents, used to go to these cyber cafes or take help from the neighborhood areas and, you know, help them translate, you know, the school circulars. The first thing that we did was coming up with an audio podcast of everything in Hindi and Punjabi language as well, along with English, for a better understanding and for ensuring that all the segment of the school population parents, you know, they get covered. So that's one thing which we did. Another thing that I'd like to mention here is you know, we have a mobile app, and this was for the first time during these 18 months. We had 100% usage of the mobile app, which was so interesting because this is something which helped us to get a lot of data, lot of insights into research. So, you know, data science was possible, analyzing, you know, what was happening around was possible, action research was possible. So this is something which technology really helped us during the COVID time, and we could really understand where we are heading to and what we are doing. When a student takes admission in our school, there's something called a SPOC in the admission form. It's called sole point of contact. And there is something, so we tell a parent to nominate one person from the family who will be the custodian of child's education. And one person from the school will be the custodian of child's education. Now the home SPOC and the school SPOC works together for the all-round development of the student, be it social, emotional, cognitive, and co-curricular, all kind of areas. Now, the moment a student takes admission, he becomes a code in our school. Now, these 10-15 years of data tracking of the student's learning journey is a great source, you know, for us, and specifically during COVID time, to understand the learning curve of the learner. So for that, we used a lot of softwares in our school. We used a software called Wingen, Excalibur, BERT. So these are certain kind of softwares absolutely free of cost, which help you assess your learners digitally, online, and see where their learning curves are going. Apart from that, one thing which we did, and I'm sure a lot of schools also did, we started working with the B.Ed college. So in every digital or online class that we had one teacher educator or intern, you know, with us in that class, and along with the sessions, we were training future teachers. So this was one thing which we did. And there were times where schools, many schools, they were not wanting those teachers to attend or enter into their classrooms, their methodology will get leaked or something like that. We ensured that we had 1 or 2 interns in every class, because NEP envisions training future teachers. Apart from that, tracking student behavior. So there's a wonderful theory called a theory by Kohlberg on moral development. And we always wonder, you know, the online digital behavior of the students. We say that value system is going for a toss. They don't know when to switch off, switch on. So this theory can be really helpful in coming up with a digital behavior track framework. And that's what we did. Apart from that, last but not the least, we are working very closely with the European Commission, and we did something which is very interesting. It's called CLIL, Content and Language Integrated Learning. So what we do is 3 days, our school children go to government school and they study there, and 3 days government school students come and study here. Now what CLIL does is that our content teacher and the government school language teacher, they do buddy teaching together, plan the lessons together, and virtually deliver the lessons. So these are certain practices that we did during these 18 to 20 months, apart from what we were doing, what other good practices other schools were doing. But this is something which really impacted us. Thank you.
Thank you. I think that 100% usage of the mobile app was very interesting to know, because obviously something triggered usage of technology far more. Having said that, Ms. Burman, your schools are mostly in Varanasi, and I think there's a lot of them in the interiors of India, tier 2, tier 3, tier 4. You have obviously been privy to student behavior of different genres of students who have been there in probably Varanasi, and also the ones who are further into the interiors of India, especially with areas like computational thinking and the learning through through the net, which is what is really happening. What's been your take? What's been the feedback of parents? What's been the feedback of students? What's your own understanding?
So good afternoon, everyone. It's a pleasure being here. And when we talk about, we were discussing just back in the boardroom about, what's the trend in the metropolitan cities, and as he just mentioned, in the 2-tiered cities. And we also have schools in the 3 and the 4. And I think one positive was that at some point you could make out that technology was also some sort of an equalizer. Almost everyone, because we were all shut down, and when I say the metropolitan cities, I'm also talking globally, because I think this was the first time that we all connected globally so beautifully, So even if I was talking to someone in Europe or someone in the US and teachers across, they were all having pretty much the same problems that we were having. And we always thought that, they are far more technologically advanced. So nothing against anyone. I'm not saying, this is true for every part of the world. But I think most of the people I spoke to had the same problem. Having said that, it was an equalizer, because if there was a child in Varanasi, or there was a child in any of our schools in a Mo or a Bhadoi or a Gorakhpur, these kids, the ones who had the backing of good device, had the backing of teachers who were well trained, were using their edtech tools well, were planning their lessons well, had a good balance between the synchronous and the asynchronous patterns of teaching, all the children were pretty much at par. That's what I noticed. The problem came only for those students, so it's not actually the place, I think, which is an issue. It's the facilities that you get. So to say that a child in the metropolitan city and everyone was absolutely at par is also not true. So similarly, whether there was a child in Varanasi or there was a child in the 3 and the 4-tier towns, if they did not have access to device, if bandwidth was not there, and the other things we all know about it was not provided, and the most important thing, if the teachers really didn't reach out to those kids well, the children still face the same challenge. So I think from that point of view, it was either a divide, and a huge divide, or it was an equalizer. So I think what was really needed from school's point of view, which I even heard in the last panel, and I think it's really important that we speak about it more and more, is the teacher training, teacher attitude. And what's really important is that besides providing the basics of the devices and internet, etc., having given everything, if your teacher hasn't been invested in the right way, where she's ready to change, where she's ready to learn, where she's ready to connect with the students and also with the parents, because I think in our in our society it's always been that parents are difficult when it comes to school handling. So I think we've really come over that to a large extent, where our parents have begun to respect us. So if you really haven't connected to all the stakeholders as a teacher, and if the teachers haven't been trained very well, it would be a problem. So I really didn't see the change from a metropolitan to a 4-tier town. It was just the way the schools handle situation, and how much was our parent economically really up to it to give the best to their child, because there were children, four children in a house, and so obviously devices were not available for everyone, so that was an issue. When you speak about the computational thinking part, I mean that's something different from what we had, which I just spoke about. I think whether it's all about the computational skills, and we were just mentioning about coding also in the junior school, and I think we've been talking about computational skills even before the pandemic, but it's come up in a very big way because I think we've all connected with each other so beautifully because it was much easier. So computational thinking skills, I think there are kind of three parts to it. There are skills, there's an attitude, and there's an approach when it comes to computational skills. So, you know, things like decomposition, you know, which we all know is a very important part of computational thinking. Look how beautifully that came up during the pandemic when we were teaching children. Children could now make out that a problem may be as big as it is, but you really have to break it down into smaller parts. Only then can you really solve a problem. Or when it came to evaluation, that, okay, I've done something, but did I really reach the end result that I set out to do? Am I really making my algorithms right? Am I really, going towards the problem solution in a stepwise way? Do I know abstraction? Do I know what's right, what's wrong? How do I sift knowledge? So I think during the pandemic, these important skills, when so much was available, we spoke about information being easily available, but over-information is also a problem. Do I know, or has my teacher taught me as a child that only this much is important and the other is actually things that really don't connect to you as of now, what you're trying to solve? Are you really communicating well? Are you collaborating? Are you persevering? So I think these are all important skills of computational thinking which were happening in Unplugged. When we talk about our coding in the junior classes, or we are making our assignments, our sheets accordingly, where children are being taught how to sort, how to recognize pattern. And today, when we just had our pandemic, we are kind of coming out of it, even in a plugged way, when we are teaching children, computational thinking skills, I think were never addressed as well as they were by all schools. So I think this has been a great learning of pandemic, these skills, these approaches, this attitude of communication, of being flexible, of being persevering, I think have come up so beautifully in the children, and I think fantastically even amongst the teachers. So,
no, thank you. I think that is pretty well articulated. Got a great insight, and I think we must touch upon the topic of children and how they're picked up during the online period versus what they pick up in the physical era. And again, it also does a lot. It's a lot to do with the kind of child, an introvert versus an extrovert, and so many such factors. But the other point which has been, I won't say disturbing me, but it's a point that we must try to understand is what is pandemic and the whole online process done for the little tiny tots? The children who are the classical 3 years to 6 years period, when there's so much that they need to pick up, the early development of the brain. And I can't help remember and recollect my favorite example, my good friend Kanak, who's here. He told me about his daughter. I think the moment she stopped going to school, her first worry was, Kanak, if I may repeat that, she was worried how she can share a lunch with a benchmate. And that's the thought that went into a little child's mind. So the whole socio-emotional connect, interacting with people, I mean, I dread to think what has happened to children who's turned 2 and 3 during this period. How do they get... So I'm very keen to come to you, Rathore Saab. You run a lot of preschools. You obviously have a pretty large alumni. And we know that preschools has been under stress. We also are aware that whenever the government is talking about opening schools, their focus is really on the higher classes. And frankly, the higher classes children are more attuned to manage their studies online. And it is really the smaller children which require that physical space. And yet we know that there is a lot of stress around because of the pandemic. What's your take on this, in terms of your understanding of this area? How are the little children coping up?
This is the pain area, what you touched about the young children, basically. See, there is controversy, or I can say there is controversial thought of our government. At one side, in the NEP, they have advocated for the education of children, put stress on the skill-based or hands-on experience, or you can say playway learning for the children of 3 to 6 years of the age. and rather they have extended it to grade 2 also. But at the same time, all the children of this age group were at home without no activity. See, in most of the preschool, children come at the age of 2 years, and that is the right time to bring children out of the house and give them education, hands-on experience, and play learning. See, another thing I talk in my address in the opening statement also in the morning. See, 100% of the preschools and 100% of the preschool teachers were untrained to handle this kind of situation. Whether it is a branded preschool chain like us or a single unit in any gali mohalla kind of school, but no one was ready to handle this kind of situation. And one major issue was all the teachers in the preschools, or I can say most of the teachers in the preschools setup are not so digitally or technically sound, because most of the teachers in preschools are just graduates or some did their grade 12 and plus nursery teacher training, and they are not so tech savvy. So they were not mentally prepared to handle this kind of situation. When the lockdown was announced and we approached all of our teachers, they were not having any book set at their home, because school were asked to close down all of a sudden. So anyhow, because the best part was in preschool segment, all the teachers resides nearby. So we managed to send book set and devices to their home, laptops and all the things by any means. To some teachers, myself also, गाड़ी में लैपटॉप और फ़ोन रख के कि हम सब्जी लेने जा रहे हैं, vegetable bag, क्योंकि that was allowed by the government. You can go out for the groceries and vegetable and fruits. So we did all these things. We conducted extensive training program for all the teachers across the country. We had, at that point of time, we had more than 2,500 teachers in our network. So we tried to convince, we tried to train them, and up to a larger extent, most of the teachers were trained in a weeks of the time. And I am very happy to share, we started our session well on time in the first week of April 2020. This is school's perspective, basically, what school did. And what children were experiencing, that is a separate issue altogether. A child doesn't want to sit in front of a screen for an hour and listen the teacher, what teacher is saying, the child of 2-3 years of the age. He wanted to go and to enter into school and play with the children and have their doll house and ball pool and whatever kind of setup our schools are having. They want to go and play in those activities. They wanted to go and share the tiffin, as Kanak's daughter was worried about. No physical activity, no social interaction. So what I think what we did, most of the preschool chain did the same way. We started in the evening time. Morning we had the routine class of the children. In the evening we hired some yoga teacher. We had some dance teachers, and we have some classes for Zumba or dance or free play and all these kind of things. So we have separate classes of clay molding and all these, so that to engage the children basically. And we started their birthday parties online. We started their pool parties online. So this kind of, but we failed to replace their physical interaction with the this online kind of facility what we extended. So there's no alternate of physical schooling for young children specifically we can't replace physical schooling with the online kind of any activity, with the help of any app, with the help of any training, anything. We can't replace it. Yeah.
Sure. No, I think I endorse what you said. At the same time, we have also heard a lot of parents saying that little children, because of the whole ability to understand digital devices and platforms early, they have also got into the habit of self-learning faster than many other children. So there are two sides to it, but I think it biases towards a little child needing a physical environment. And that's where I want to come to you, Avnish, because, Little Millennium and Millennium, these are chains that has been around for a while. And if I recollect, Millennium Schools is one of the early adapters of technology. The whole smart class, Educom smart class solutions in the classrooms of Millennium Schools and the interactive boards has been around, I think, more than 2 decades, for more than a decade and a half. Did that help you folks manage this period a little better than many other schools because you adapted early to it? And if you could give a context both from a preschool perspective and the main school perspective, maybe we can try and figure out whether it complements what Mr. Rathore said or whether there's another viewpoint to this.
So, thank you, Vinesh, and good afternoon, everyone. Certainly, it was an advantage for us because when it comes to the asynchronous learning systems, we already had a lot of teaching resources available with us. As Vinesh was mentioning, the whole smart class initiative has been on for a very long time. So yes, the asynchronous piece was in place, but what was needed was to add, a layer of what is the teacher going to really do if the child doesn't attend the class in a synchronous mode at all. There, we sort of did a crowdsourcing model where a lot of our teachers got involved and created content which completed a unit which can be delivered asynchronously. So there was a complete set of contents which was delivered asynchronously to the children. And later on, when the synchronous learning comes in, the teaching resources which were already there were helpful for delivering the content to the children and running the school in a virtual mode as good as it would have run in a real scenario. So yes, the resources, we were way ahead. I think in the second week of April, our online school was up and running. So it just took us a couple of weeks to be up and ready for the K-12 system. However, when it comes to online preschools, that was a bit of a challenge. And there as well, I think the youngest age group, the age group of 2 to 3 years, was the one which took the maximum hit because the parents themselves had the mindset of letting go of an year. Although that's one of the most important years, we would all agree, in the child's learning journey. But the parents were fine with just sitting back at home and engaging the child in the ways and means they could. So we were up and running there as well. In the month of May, we had our online preschool, which is the Little Millennium preschools, up and running. Again, both synchronous as well as asynchronous modules in that. But the adoption for the younger children was not that good, 2 to 3 years. However, the other children, the ones still before grade 1, did had good adoption, and there again we had an advantage of a head start, Vinesh.
Right. No, thank you for that. And I think it almost therefore is synonymous with what you mentioned, Rathoji mentioned, as far as the smaller children are concerned. We're going to get a different perspective from you, Brian, because Noda Anglia, as I understand, is there present in almost 31 countries. Therefore, we are talking about 31 different countries and their practices during this period. Very, very keen to know what are the global practices that were adopted during this period, number one. Number two, do you really believe that those can be just transported into India, given that you now have a fair idea of the Indian terrain and the way the Indian ecosystem works in the education space? Do you really think we can apply that here? Just give a perspective and please be blunt about it.
Thank you very much. Well, I can be blunt, but I want to get out alive because it's lunch next. So can I, first of all, say good afternoon. Thank you for the question. Thank you to the organisers for inviting me. It's a great opportunity and it's a delight to be here. And congratulations to my colleagues on the panel for the insights they've given into this current situation. Now, to answer the question, can the lessons learned globally be implemented in India? Of course they can. Because, shock of shocks, children and teachers are the same the world over. They may encounter slightly different nuances of situations, but as a general rule, the practices are the same in many respects. If you look at the global situation, we're fortunate in, well, we have 5 great Oak Ridge schools in India, but we have 76 schools in 31 countries. And what that meant, and does mean, is that there's a clear network of support internationally for teachers in India and for teachers in India to support their colleagues elsewhere. It's a two-way street. Initially, we were helped by the fact that our school in Hong Kong had the first experience of online learning. Because of the protests in Hong Kong, schools had been closed. And there was a demand from parents, well, what are you going to do? My child's sitting at home, I'm paying fees, they're not getting any education. So overnight, the school had to develop their ways of dealing with it. So to an extent, they were the pilot. And in piloting it, they found out all the problems and pitfalls that the rest of us would have found ourselves if it hadn't been for their early warning. So they shared with their colleagues, this is what we did, this is the material we used, this is the software that worked, these are the pieces that didn't. This is what you should use or not use. And in the case of our colleagues in India and in other schools, we buddied up directly with members of staff who had that experience. That gave teachers a great deal of confidence, and it helped them have an early start as far as delivering our virtual school experience was concerned. In addition to that, we have what we call Nord Anglia University, which is our online connection for all of our staff, teaching and administrative. So you can contact your opposite number in any one of the 30 other countries and say, well, how's it going for you? I'm teaching this topic, I'm having trouble. Anybody, any ideas? And instantly you'll get support from around the world, but equally you'll get it from India. And that was shown in our global campus. And global campus is our way of networking and connecting all of our children from age 3 to 18. They're all set tasks and projects for them to solve as problems or to be involved in various activities. It can be photography, it can be creative writing, it could be anything in any subject area. But in linking together, they're talking to children in other countries and sharing experiences they wouldn't normally have. And the material they're using is devised by our teachers. So for example, one of our schools in Vietnam, to get across the issue of the youngest preschool children not having suitable connection, they produced what we called curiosity kits. And in each bag, there were materials, stories, resources, paper, whatever was needed. And each of our schools in each of the 31 countries adopted that idea. And in India, we sent all of those bags home. They were extremely well received, but at the same time, we offered workshops to parents, because for those children aged 3, 4, 5, the only way it works is through partnership with parents. So parents then were given the chance to learn, well, this is what you're going to do. And each day the teacher would take a few minutes at the beginning and say, this is what you're going to need out of the curiosity kit. Including in that what we called story sacks. You could either have hard copy or you could have it online. And the story sacks were different teachers in different countries sharing stories from their culture. I've got to tell you, some of the most popular were the ones from India. So our teachers in India take an Indian story, develop the material, and share it around the world. And in many parts of the world, they'd never encountered that before. And equally, our children in our schools in India could learn about cultures in different parts of the world that they might know very little about either. So those are some of the ways we can make the global connection, and that's the advantage. But over and above that, the key to all of this, I think, is, as my colleague said, professional development. The company invests in professional development to a very high extent, not just in monetary terms, but in time. So for example, 50 teachers a year are paid for by the company to study a Master's in International Education devised by King's College London. We have our online modules that every teacher can pick and choose. I want to do this one in assessment for learning. I want to do this on cooperative teaching. They have the choice, but the choice is there all the time for them. They have leadership courses they can be involved in, and we have training programs that run throughout our schools. And people are given time to attend these courses, take part in the courses, as well as the ones that everyone else will access, IB training, IGCSE, other international curricular courses, as well as their own national curricula. That investment in professional development is absolutely key to how we're going to succeed in any country, and the same applies to India. But I think what India needs is direction and leadership, and it needs some central service to draw together the best examples of what's happening in India. There's a lot of very good work in India, but it's ad hoc, it's bitty, it's not unified, it's not directed, it's not led, it's not funded, and it's not encouraged enough. Is that blunt enough?
Yes and no. I would love to hear more, but yes, I understand we have a paucity of time. But what I've just picked up from all what I've just heard from the panel, and that's what I was on my mobile writing instead of a pen and paper, which I used to do in the past. But I picked up a few keywords which could probably be a summary of this conversation. I picked up that 100% usage of the app, and therefore technology really got more adapted and adopted during this period because you had no other choice. So we had to do it. At the same time, it was beneficial only to those children who had the facilities, and therefore the big risk of digital divide is there. And one must not forget that India has got more than 260 million children going to more than 1.5 million schools. We're just talking about a few students in the private school space, but there's this huge government ecosystem which we are probably trying to, which might need attention. Thank you for bringing that out, Ms. Burman. I think training to manage the little kids in the early years is perhaps very, very important, both for parents and for teachers. Pandemic got us to realize that we had to do something. But what if there was no pandemic? Would this have become an important talking point? We don't know that. So I think that probably is very important. Brian, I think parents and children being the same the world over is so much refreshing to know. So that means that the problem is pretty much similar, and all it requires is a way of approaching the problem differently for different for different countries or ecosystems. Networking and connecting all the children that you just mentioned, Brian, I think that's fascinating, and someday can we have all our 260 million children connected in some form? Could be probably the answer to what can make us into a better country. Leadership to drive us through a process that we're going through, or through this period that we're going through, very true. I'm adding the word continuous to your word professional development, because I think sometimes what happens, and I know this from the government side at least because I work a lot at the government schools, there are these pockets of training. So you have a 15-day or a 7-day training for teachers. They all are brought into a place, training happens, and then they are sent back. And I think that's not the way to do it. You need to have a continuous development of what they're picking up, and it's not kind of in silos that they can be taught. And many of them have to be contextual to what they are doing in the classrooms on a daily basis. So these are some of the points that I think I picked up as summary. But that said, I'm not done yet. I have another 5 minutes, and therefore I'm going to take the liberty to ask each of you, starting reverse order, and therefore with you, Brian, just give me the one, let's call it the thing that did not go right during the pandemic, and the one thing that went right in the pandemic. You can make it two also, but one just to keep the time going. And keep the child at the center. So everything else can be, of course, around it. But from a child's perspective, because it's ultimately all of us are here to get a child to progress. So from a child's perspective, what has gone wrong during the pandemic? What went right during the pandemic? And hence, what do you believe we should be now aiming for going forward as the model? And I know it's not easy to answer this in one line, but do try your best to just give a sense.
Okay, thank you. I love the fact you ask easy questions. So first, from the child's perspective, what definitely went wrong was the lack of peer support, peer involvement, socialization. If you ask any student at the end of their career, they will almost always say to you that what was the most important factor for me was that circle of friends who helped me throughout my time in school. Because that's what makes the difference. And online, yes, you can try and replicate it through various pieces of software. It's not the same as physically being with your circle of friends, your peers, your classmates, because you learn as much from each other as you do from a teacher. So I think that's the biggest loss. And for the youngest children, that's clearly evident, because what they're learning is about social skills, do so much for themselves that they couldn't do before, and struck by how the teacher had engaged them in that enterprise. But equally, for older children, that capacity of independent learning was very strong. What I'm most interested in, what I've referred to in other webinars, are the groups we overlook. We need to make sure we don't lose sight of what we've gained from online learning. We're busy being miserable about it and saying, oh, isn't it awful, and everyone's fallen behind and there's been a terrible loss. No, there hasn't. Some groups of children have made huge progress. Two I will identify. One, the shy, quiet, reserved student who never answers a question in class and never says anything and doesn't complain. Online, they have flourished. I can show you evidence of children in that category who've made 2 years' progress in one. Why is that? Because nobody's gainsaying them, nobody's embarrassing them, they're not talking up about them, nothing like that's happening, and suddenly they can fly. And the other group are those disaffected, bored boys in class, you know, with that permanent look of, oh, do I have to be here? And what's happened with them is that they treat online learning as a game, because they're so used to using devices that they think this is now the gamification of learning. And they have also done exceptionally well. So how do we keep that going? Now we're looking at, for example, giving choice during the week. This afternoon, do you want to do this exercise in class, or do you want to go to the IT lab or the IB Resource Centre or whatever and do it online? Do you want to do a group in the corner on a beanbag, or do you want to do it somewhere else? And I think we have to do more and more of that, so we're not losing what those children have gained. So hopefully that gives you some insight of examples.
Yes, you have. And since the same question is going around to everybody, I'm sure we'll have a few different thoughts. Avnish, what's your take on the same question?
So I think for the loss, I completely agree on the socio-emotional aspect. The children have not interacted with each other, have not stepped out, so it's a big loss, the social skills. But I think on the gains part, we have been talking about the losses which the children have incurred in terms of the learning outcomes, etc. But one aspect which flourished during these times were certain skill sets. For example, research as a skill. Today, if you see any child in any of the schools, they can figure things out. They are very comfortable with devices, finding things out. So it's not that we should just wash it off and say that the year was a loss, the years were a loss, a total loss. It is about what we are looking at. And if we are looking at certain skill sets, there has been tremendous gains. The technology skills, for example, the research skills, for example, these are good gains for the children. And yes, there have been losses like the social emotional aspects. So a mixed bag, and the things can be covered. Now what we need to be prepared for and what we are working for is certain bridge programs. In the sense, when the children come back to school over the next 2-3 years, how do we make sure that the advantages are not lost, and at the same time, whatever we have lost is covered without putting too much of extra pressure on the students. So that's right. My perspective.
No, thank you. Thank you for that. Rathoji, what is the way forward? What do you think we should now, what is the model that you think we should now adopt as an education environment, given the learnings of both the last 20 months and the previous?
See, what I have learned in last 20 years of my professional journey with young children. See, they are very fast learners. So I strongly believe now the schools are opening, and it's already opened in many of the states. In UP, all of my schools are open now. So students majorly, so more than 75% students have started coming to schools. So I feel they'll pick up very fast, and we have to design activities accordingly. Now the standard things will not work for at least for 1 year from now. We have to be very we have very scientific approach, so that the learning gap what we have created in last 20 months, that up to certain extent that should be filled. One thing. Second thing, we can't deny the children who have not ever gone to any preschool for this reason, because the child who was at the age of, because this is not a mandatory education. Preschool education is not mandatory till the NEP is into force. So many of the parents waits for the child to turn 2.5 or 3 years. They don't send their children at the age of 2 to the preschool. So the child who was turning to 2.5 year or 3 year, they have never see preschool education now. So what in my setup, I have asked my academic team to design the activities in grade 1 also, or maybe upper KG also accordingly, so that they'll cover up something what they were supposed to learn in the preschooling basically. But still, they left with some crayons missing in their box.
Yes, I agree. Ms. Burman, so do you think the government of India should bring a diktat that every child's birthday till 3 to 4 years, compulsorily one Wi-Fi connection and a device should be given as a gift? What do you think we should do?
So it's actually it's really not a bad idea for those who can afford it. I think it's possibly one of the best gifts that you can give to your child today. Give them a device which is just meant for education purposes and research. And of course give them Wi-Fi, which I really think has become quite cheap over the years with great speed. So your question stands, and I say yes to it. It should be a great gift. The way we used to say, I'm sure most of the schools said it because we said it too, it's birthday time, so nothing but give a book in the child's hand. I think today, if you really want to give the child more than just a book, give him a good device and give him Wi-Fi. But does the other question also stand for me? Because I've been preparing for it.
It does.
Okay, right. Because the challenge is increasing as you keep, going to the different panelists. Anyways, so my points are pretty actually similar to what Brian said. What has been the biggest advantage? It's been independent learning. So I won't go deeper. I think we all stand at that. The children have really learned to learn on their own thanks to technology and the way the teachers have carried things forward. So I just want to add to that. I think one of the biggest learnings personally for our setup in the schools has been the assessment patterns, which has also of course helped children to become independent learners. But I think that's been formative assessments have become so interesting, have become so quick. So, and you use games and you use your quizzes and you're using so many different ways of doing it. And not only has it become easy to do, it gives you quick, instant feedback. So as a teacher and as a child, I get to know where I stand at the end of what my teacher's done with me today. So I know my gaps instantly. So I think as a teacher and as a child, when I know the gaps instantly, I revisit it as an independent learner. I revisit the gaps with the help of technology. And obviously when my gaps are filled up and everything's done, I get that aha moment and I get my joy of learning. So I think that's been one of the biggest things that technology has brought about. And it's the same even for the teacher, that there's a problem and I need to revisit it. So I think that goes without saying. So that's one. The other thing I want to add, which was actually mentioned to some extent in the previous panel, has been the parental connect and the parent respect. I did mention it just a little initially also, that we always viewed our parents and therefore our parents always viewed
us very negatively. The relations were hardly ever seen as being the best. But I think when the teachers also, despite all their previous, thoughts about teachers, when the parents would see the teachers teaching 30 children, 40 children in a class on the online platform, struggling, they had their child back home, and they thought, I can't handle one. How difficult it is for a teacher to handle 30, 40, and with children doing all kind of mischief, of course. But teachers were so persevering, they went on, and they picked up their phones and they connected. And I think this is true for all schools, because wherever I've been talking to, been on webinars, etc., everyone has been talking, my relationship with my parent has changed completely. And I think that has been one of the biggest revolutions in education today. Because one of the biggest stakeholder in this whole transaction of teaching learning has come to our side, and we've actually won them over positively. So there can be nothing better than this. Coming to what didn't work well, it's still the social emotional aspect. So I don't want to go over that. The only thing I'd like to say is, when social emotional connect hasn't been very well, in that case, now that we are back in the school, I think all of us have got our teachers, our counselors, everyone talking, connecting to the child. Content has gone out. What's important is getting my child emotionally all repaired back to me and telling him that, I really care for what you are today, and his grief counseling if they've lost their parents. And I think we all have also got a lot of cases in our school where children have gone through a lot of grief, where they've lost parents or their loved ones. So I think grief counseling and connecting with parents as with the students is the most important thing today.
That was straight from the heart and so passionate. Thank you. Niyati, you have the last word to wind up the session with your thoughts.
I think almost all the speakers have really covered all the points.
You have the choice of saying ditto.
Oh, okay, no. I would, though of course ditto is there. I'd like to start with ditto. But then along with that, I think one thing which, from the child's perspective, which I think children must have experienced, is, that we were having PTM on daily basis. So they're sitting inside the classroom and the parent is sitting next to the child, and after the class gets over, there happens a PTM right there after the class. And it's a torture for the student. You cannot learn, when you're being monitored or tested or gauged, every now and then. So I think that wasn't a very pleasant part of the whole 18 to 20 months experience. Along with that, the practicals, I think somewhere, no matter we had products, technology, simulations, but hello, the labs in the school, there's certain things where, only laboratories can offer. And we are doing something in technology where we're teaching mobile technology, energy, electronics, household technology, all that to students of our school. And we have these wonderful hands-on kits, and a lot of schools must be using the similar kits. Now, how do you do that digitally? So when hands-on experience is needed, that is where, there was a total miss during these 18 to 20 months. No matter what best products digitally you kind, but you can't connect to wires digitally, with your hands. So I think this is one thing which really affected education. And the positive part was that, as ma'am said, that, so this is a thread, and one side is a parent, another side is the teacher. So if the teacher and the parental teamwork holds the thread well, the child is in the state of equilibrium, right? And the child will be a balanced child. Now, this is something which normally during the offline scenario, parents were not part of our classrooms. But today, the parents are part of the classrooms. They understand the teachers' problems. They understand that, how the pace of a lesson goes up, goes down. And last but not the least, the assessments. So we are moving beyond pen and paper format, so which is incredible. And apart from that, we've survived the entire experience. I think that's the best thing as a takeaway. So I think I'm done. Thank you.
No, I can only say one thing after listening to all of you, that probably the future of education can neither be physical nor digital. I think it has to be the phygital model, which is a combination of the two. And the last 20 months has taught us how to do the other side. So as someone said, we shouldn't forget the online mechanism just because we go offline. At the same time, if we go offline, we shouldn't, or rather physical, we shouldn't forget that there is another platform which we cannot use during an emergency. It has to be a way of our everyday teaching experience. Any questions from the audience to them? We've got about a minute left. Any questions? Yes, ma'am. If someone could please give her a mic.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you very much to all the panelists for their wonderful the opinion they shared, and also how the things were handled at the end. In the beginning, when it started, I was little sad when it was said that at elementary years program, things were not done well because children couldn't understand or we couldn't connect. But slowly and gradually, as the comments kept coming in, that actually taken my it started boosting me a little, because I shared the same emotions what ma'am, I believe Amrita said, because you know, at my school, as we say about elementary years program, these children, they cannot do anything alone on the virtual platform. They need their parents. Of course, the teacher is there. So for us, from day one, the learning started, but with a totally different module. It changed from the normal scenario to concept-based learning. So that was one thing, where the concept was initiated. As Sir Berman said, the curiosity. So we don't.
Sorry to intervene, but if you have a question, otherwise this.
No, I just wanted to say that everything is possible if the teacher is passionate, if the curriculum is designed well, the age doesn't matter. So I just wanted to share that professional development, teachers, Trinity Triangle, where the child is at the apex, and educators and parents, when we work hand in hand, everything is possible. The age doesn't matter.
Great, thank you. So you echoed what they said and you summarized what they said.
Yes, thank you very much.
Any other questions, anyone? I've just got the time's up message. Any last question? Otherwise, I would really request all of you to give a great round of applause for these folks. It was wonderful, wonderful. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, everyone. I would like to request Mr. Vinesh Menon to come forward and present the token of appreciation to all our panelists. Dr. Niyati Chitkara, Amrita Berman, Dr. S.K. Rathore, Brian Kuklin, and Mr. Avnish Singh. I would also request Dr. Niyati ma'am to come forward and present the token of appreciation to Mr. Vinesh Menon sir. thank you to all our eminent speakers. I would love to remind that Jabra is organizing a lucky draw prize contest where they are gifting away 5 beautifully customized headphones specifically for educational growth. In order to participate, kindly fill in the forms, kept at your front desk and drop them at the Jabra corner outside. Proceeding, we'll go with a 45-minute break for lunch.